Marcus walked through the school hallway with his head down, clutching his worn backpack tightly. The other students barely noticed him as he hurried past. But when they did, whispers followed in his wake. His clothes were clean but clearly second-hand. His shoes had small holes that he tried to hide, and his hair looked like he had cut it himself. "Look at Marcus the loser," Jake whispered to his friends as Marcus passed their lockers. "Did you see those pants? I think my dad wore those in the 80s. The group erupted in quiet laughter, making sure Marcus could hear just enough to know he was the target. Marcus pretended not to hear and kept walking. He had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him that he had skipped breakfast again. There wasn't enough food for both him and his little sister Emma, and she needed it more than he did. She was only 8 years old, and still growing. In his first class, Marcus struggled to keep his eyes open. He had been up until 2 in the morning, working on homework, after putting Emma to bed, doing laundry, and preparing her lunch for the next day. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed him nodding off and frowned with disappointment. "Marcus, perhaps you'd like to share with the class what's more interesting than algebra?" she asked, her voice cutting through the quiet classroom. The other students turned to stare at him, some snickering. Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment. "Sorry, Mrs. Rodriguez. I was listening." Crowned. Mrs. Rodriguez. Crowned. Clearly not well enough. "See me after class." When the bell rang, Marcus approached her desk nervously. Mrs. Rodriguez looked at him with concern mixed with frustration. "Marcus, your grades have been slipping all semester. You're a bright boy, but you seem distracted. Is everything all right at home?" Marcus nodded quickly. "Everything's fine. I just need to focus better." He couldn't tell her the truth. He couldn't explain that their father had left when Emma was just 4 years old, or that their mother had died in a car accident 2 years ago. He couldn't tell her that at 16, he was now Emma's legal guardian, working part-time at a grocery store after school to pay rent on their tiny apartment. Social services had almost separated them, but Marcus had convinced them he could handle the responsibility. He was determined to keep that promise. "I'll do better," he told Mrs. Rodriguez, and hurried out before she could ask more questions. At lunch, Marcus sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria, slowly eating a peanut butter sandwich he had made from the last bit of food at home. He watched other students with their hot lunches and felt his stomach growl again, but he tried to ignore it. Emma would be eating her school lunch right now at the elementary school across town, and that's what mattered. "Hey, charity case," Jake called out as he walked past with his tray full of pizza and fruit. "Nice sandwich. Did you make that with the free peanut butter from the food bank?" Marcus looked up, his jaw tightening. Jake was the mayor's son, always dressed in expensive clothes and carrying the latest phone. He had never worked a day in his life or worried about where his next meal was coming from. "Leave me alone, Jake," Marcus said quietly. "Or what? You'll tell your mommy? Oh wait, I heard she's not around anymore." Jake's friends laughed cruelly at his comment. Marcus stood up slowly, his hands clenching into fists. For a moment, the cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Marcus was taller than Jake, and had developed muscles from his job, loading boxes and carrying heavy groceries. But he thought about Emma, about what would happen if he got suspended or expelled. He needed to graduate. He needed to keep working. Emma depended on him. He picked up his backpack and walked away without another word, leaving Jake standing there looking disappointed that he hadn't gotten the fight he wanted. After school, Marcus rushed to his job at Peterson's grocery. Mr. Peterson, the elderly owner, greeted him with a kind smile. "How was school today, son?" "Good," Marcus lied, tying his apron around his waist. Mr. Peterson was one of the few adults who knew about his situation, and he had been incredibly understanding about Marcus's schedule. He let him work extra hours on weekends, and always made sure there were damaged items that Marcus could take home for free. Marcus spent the afternoon stocking shelves, helping customers, and cleaning. His body ached from fatigue, but he pushed through. Every hour he worked meant money for rent, utilities, and food. Every dollar brought them closer to security. At 6 o'clock, he hurried to pick up Emma from the after-school program. She ran to him with her usual bright smile, her backpack bouncing as she threw her arms around his waist. "Marcus, I made a picture of us today," she said excitedly, pulling out a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands. One was tall with dark hair like Marcus, and one was small with pigtails like her own. "It's beautiful, Em." "I love it," he said, genuinely smiling for the first time all day. Her happiness was worth everything he went through. They walked home together, Emma chattering about her day, her friends, and her favorite teacher. Marcus listened carefully, asking questions and making jokes that made her giggle. This was his favorite part of the day, when he could forget about the bullies and the stress and just be her big brother. Their apartment was small and sparse, but Marcus had worked hard to make it feel like home. There were Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, books from the library on the shelves, and a few family photos that had survived their many moves. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. "What's for dinner?" Emma asked as they walked in. Marcus opened the nearly empty refrigerator and tried to hide his worry. "How about spaghetti?" he said, knowing there was just enough pasta for one serving. He would tell Emma he wasn't hungry and eat the leftover peanut butter sandwich from lunch. As Emma did her homework at the kitchen table, Marcus helped her with math problems while doing his own assignments. She struggled with multiplication, and he patiently explained it different ways until she understood. Her success in school was just as important to him as his own. "Marcus," Emma said as he tucked her into bed later that night. "Yeah, Em? Some kids at school ask about our mom and dad. What should I tell them?" Marcus felt his heart break a little. Emma rarely talked about their parents anymore, and he tried to protect her from the pain of their loss. "You can tell them whatever feels right to you, but remember, we have each other, and that's what family means." Emma nodded sleepily. "I'm glad you're my brother. I'm glad you're my sister too. Sweet dreams." After she fell asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his homework, a calculator, and a stack of bills. The rent was due in a week, and he was short $50. He would have to ask Mr. Peterson for extra shifts. Maybe give up lunch for the rest of the week. He would figure it out somehow. He always did. As he worked by the dim light of their single lamp, Marcus thought about the other kids at school. They complained about curfews and chores, and having to ask their parents for money. They had no idea how lucky they were to have someone else worrying about the important things while they focused on being teenagers. He wasn't angry with them, exactly. They couldn't help the families they were born into any more than he could help his circumstances. But their casual cruelty, their assumption that he was just lazy or stupid, wore on him more than he liked to admit. Marcus finished his homework around midnight and set his alarm for 6 in the morning. Tomorrow would bring another day of whispers and stares, another day of pretending everything was fine while carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. But it would also bring Emma's smile when he picked her up from school, and that made it all worthwhile. He looked at her drawing on the refrigerator one more time before heading to bed. 2 stick figures holding hands. That's all they needed to be okay. 3 months into the school year, Marcus faced his biggest challenge yet. Emma came down with a fever that wouldn't break, and he had to miss 2 days of work to take care of her. The lost wages meant they were behind on the electric bill, and Marcus could feel the stress eating away at him. At school, his exhaustion was becoming impossible to hide. He fell asleep in English class and accidentally dropped his grocery store uniform from his backpack, which Jake immediately spotted. "Look, everyone, Marcus works at Peterson's," Jake announced loudly. "My mom says only desperate people work there. The pay is like nothing." Several students turned to look, and Marcus quickly stuffed the uniform back into his bag. He felt his cheeks burning with shame, not because there was anything wrong with honest work, but because he knew Jake would use this information to make his life even more difficult. "Is that why you always smell like cleaning supplies?" asked Sarah, one of Jake's followers. She wrinkled her nose dramatically. "And here I thought it was because you couldn't afford soap." The comments stung more than usual because Marcus had indeed been using the industrial soap from work when they ran out of regular soap at home. He had hoped no one would notice the difference in scent. During lunch, Marcus overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. Jake was talking to a group of students about throwing a party at his house that weekend. "We should invite Marcus," Jake said with a mean smile. "It would be hilarious to watch him try to fit in with normal people. Plus, someone needs to serve the drinks, right?" The group laughed, but one girl, Lindsay, looked uncomfortable. "That's kind of mean, Jake. Maybe we should just leave him alone." "Why are you defending the weirdo?" Jake shot back. "He's probably too poor to come anyway. I heard his family lives in that gross apartment complex by the railroad tracks." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. He couldn't let Jake find out where they lived. Emma's safety depended on keeping their lives private. He quickly got up and left the cafeteria, his appetite completely gone. That afternoon at work, Mr. Peterson noticed Marcus seemed more upset than usual. "Son, you look like you're carrying the weight of the world. Everything all right?" Marcus hesitated, then found himself opening up slightly. "There are some kids at school who like to make fun of me. Usually I can handle it, but today they were talking about where I live. I can't let them find out about Emma." Mr. Peterson nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Marcus, I've been watching you work here for months. You're more responsible than men twice your age. Don't let those kids make you feel ashamed of what you're doing. Taking care of your sister is noble work. It doesn't feel noble when I can barely afford to feed us both," Marcus admitted quietly. "Have you thought about talking to someone at school? There might be resources available that could help." Marcus shook his head quickly. "I can't risk anyone getting involved with social services. If they think I can't handle things, they'll take Emma away." Mr. Peterson looked sad but understanding. "You're a good brother, Marcus, but you're also just a kid yourself. You shouldn't have to handle all of this alone." The next day brought Marcus's worst nightmare. He arrived at school to find Jake and his friends clustered around something on Jake's phone, whispering excitedly. When they saw Marcus approaching, Jake held up the phone with a triumphant grin. "Look what I found online," Jake announced. "A news article from 2 years ago about a car accident. Says a woman named Sarah Coleman died, leaving behind 2 children." Marcus felt the world stop spinning. His mother's maiden name had been Coleman, and they had kept it when going into the system to make things simpler. "The article says the kids went into foster care," Jake continued. "I wonder what happened to them." "Oh wait, Marcus, isn't your last name Coleman too?" Other students were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Marcus stood frozen, unable to think of any way to deny what Jake had discovered. "So Marcus is an orphan," Jake said loudly. "That explains everything. No wonder he's such a freak. No parents to teach him how to act normal." "That's enough, Jake." The voice came from Lindsay, who stepped forward with an angry expression. "Leave him alone." "Why? I'm just sharing interesting news," Jake said innocently. "Did you know there are programs for orphans? Maybe Marcus can get some charity money. Although I guess he'd have to admit he needs help first." Marcus felt something snap inside him. All the months of keeping quiet, all the careful control he maintained to protect Emma, suddenly felt pointless. Jake knew their secret now, and he would never let it go. "You think this is funny?" Marcus said, his voice quiet but dangerous. "You think making jokes about dead parents is entertaining?" The hallway had gone completely silent. Even Jake seemed surprised by the cold fury in Marcus's voice. "My mother died trying to get to my sister's school play," Marcus continued. "Some drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car. She was carrying the flowers she bought for Emma's performance. They found the bouquet scattered all over the road." Jake's smirk was fading, but Marcus wasn't finished. "You want to know why I work at Peterson's? Because I pay rent on our apartment. Because I buy groceries and cook dinner and help with homework and make sure Emma has clean clothes for school. Because at 16, I'm the only parent she has left, and I'm not going to let her down." Several students were staring with shocked expressions. Some looked ashamed of their earlier laughter. "You think I'm poor? You're right. Some nights I go to bed hungry because there's only enough food for one of us. And Emma is still growing." You think my clothes are ugly? They are. I buy them at thrift stores because new clothes mean less money for Emma's school supplies. Marcus stepped closer to Jake, who had gone pale. You want to make fun of me for smelling like cleaning supplies? That's because I work 40 hours a week on top of going to school. Because keeping our electricity on is more important than buying fancy body wash. You want to laugh at my haircuts? I do them myself in our bathroom mirror. Because $20 for a barber is $20. Emma can't eat. The hallway was completely silent now. Marcus could see teachers appearing at the edges of the crowd, but none of them tried to stop him. So go ahead and laugh, Jake. Make your jokes about the orphan boy. But remember that while you're playing video games and complaining about your allowance, I'm making sure an 8-year-old girl doesn't lose the only family she has left. Marcus turned and walked away, leaving Jake standing speechless in front of the entire crowd. He didn't stop until he reached the empty gymnasium, where he finally let himself feel the full weight of what had just happened. His secret was out. Everyone knew now. There was no going back to being invisible, to protecting Emma by staying quiet. He had exposed them both, and he wasn't sure what the consequences would be. But for the first time in months, Marcus felt something like relief. He had told the truth, and it felt better than carrying the lie alone. Whatever happened next, at least he had stopped pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. He sat on the bleachers and pulled out his phone to text Mr. Peterson that he might be late for work. As he typed, he noticed his hands weren't shaking anymore. For once, he didn't feel afraid of what people might think or say. The truth was out. And somehow, that felt like a kind of freedom. Lindsay found him there 20 minutes later. She sat down beside him without asking permission. That was brave, she said quietly. That was stupid, Marcus replied. Now everyone knows our business. Maybe that's not such a bad thing, Lindsay said. Maybe you don't have to carry everything by yourself. Marcus looked at her, surprised by the kindness in her voice. He had been so focused on protecting Emma that he had forgotten other people could be compassionate too. Jake's an idiot, Lindsay continued. But most people aren't like him. Most people would want to help if they knew what you were dealing with. Cross. I can't risk anyone getting involved, Marcus said. Emma is all I have. I understand, Lindsay said. But you're all Emma has too. And you're burning out. I can see it. She was right, and Marcus knew it. The stress was eating him alive, and it was only getting worse as Emma got older and their expenses grew. But admitting he needed help felt like admitting failure, and failure meant losing Emma. Think about it, Lindsay said as she stood up. There might be ways to get support that don't involve losing your sister. But you'll never know if you don't try. As she walked away, Marcus sat alone in the quiet gymnasium, thinking about her words. For the first time since their mother's death, he allowed himself to imagine what it might feel like to not carry everything alone. The idea was terrifying and hopeful at the same time. The days following Marcus's confrontation with Jake brought unexpected changes. Word of what had happened spread quickly through the school, but not in the way Marcus had feared. Instead of more bullying and whispers, he found students treating him with something that looked like respect. Mrs. Rodriguez approached him after algebra class with a concerned expression. Marcus, I heard about what happened in the hallway yesterday. Would you be willing to stay after school to talk? Marcus's first instinct was to make an excuse and leave, but something in her tone made him reconsider. I can stay for a few minutes, but I have to pick up my sister by 4:30. Of course. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded. I understand you have responsibilities. When the classroom emptied, she pulled up a chair beside his desk instead of staying behind her own. Marcus, I want to apologize. I've been frustrated with your performance in class, but I didn't understand what you were dealing with at home. Can you tell me more about your situation? For the second time in 2 days, Marcus found himself sharing his story with an adult. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interrupting, her expression growing more concerned with each detail. How long have you been managing everything alone? She asked when he finished. 2 years, Marcus said, since the accident. Social services helped us get set up in the apartment, but I convinced them I could handle being Emma's guardian. I've been trying to prove I was right ever since. Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Marcus, what you're doing is incredibly admirable. But there are resources available that could help you without putting your guardianship at risk. Have you heard of the school district's family support program? Marcus shook his head. He had been so focused on staying under the radar that he had never looked into what help might be available. There are programs for students in situations like yours: financial assistance, tutoring support, even help with childcare. These aren't charity handouts. They're investments in your future. Let me give you some information to take home. She handed him a folder full of pamphlets and forms. And, Marcus? Your grades don't have to suffer because of your circumstances. We can work together to help you succeed. That afternoon at Peterson's grocery, Marcus shared Mrs. Rodriguez's offer with Mr. Peterson, who smiled broadly. I told you there were people who would want to help. Mrs. Rodriguez is good people. You should listen to her. But what if getting help brings attention from social services? What if they decide I can't handle things after all? Mr. Peterson leaned against the counter thoughtfully. Son, from where I'm standing, you're already handling things better than most adults would. Getting support doesn't make you weak, it makes you smart. Emma needs you healthy and successful, not burnt out and exhausted. As if to prove his point, Marcus nearly dropped a case of canned goods due to his fatigue. Mr. Peterson caught it easily. See what I mean? You're running on empty, Marcus. Let people help you fill back up. When Marcus picked up Emma that afternoon, she immediately noticed his improved mood. You seem happier today, she said, skipping beside him as they walked home. Did something good happen at school? Marcus considered how much to tell her. Emma was smart for her age, but he tried to protect her from the worst of their financial struggles. I talked to my teacher about getting some extra help with my schoolwork, he said, and maybe some help with other things too. Emma nodded seriously. That sounds good. You work really hard, Marcus. Sometimes I hear you working late at night when I'm supposed to be sleeping. The comment hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. He had thought he was protecting Emma by handling everything quietly, but she had been aware of his struggles all along. You know you can talk to me if you're worried about anything, right? I know, she said. But I also know you worry enough for both of us. I try not to add more. Marcus stopped walking and knelt down to her level. Emma, listen to me. You are 8 years old. It's not your job to worry about grown-up things or to protect my feelings. That's my job. If something is bothering you, I want to know about it, okay? Emma nodded, her eyes bright with tears she was trying not to shed. Okay. Can I tell you something now? Of course. Sometimes I'm scared that you'll get too tired and sick to take care of me, and then I'll have to go live with strangers again. Marcus felt his heart break. He pulled Emma into a tight hug, fighting back his own tears. That is never going to happen, he said firmly. I will never be too tired or too sick to take care of you. We're family, and families stick together no matter what, but maybe it's time I let some other people help us so you don't have to worry about me getting too tired. That evening, Marcus spread Mrs. Rodriguez's information across their kitchen table while Emma did her homework. There were programs he had never heard of, resources that could help with everything from utilities to groceries to after-school care. Some required applications and interviews, but none of them threatened his guardianship of Emma. What's all that? Emma asked, looking up from her math problems. Information about programs that help families like us, Marcus explained. Things that could make life easier. Emma studied the pamphlets with interest. Like what? Well, there's a program that helps pay for groceries so we always have enough food. And another one that helps with electricity bills. And something called Big Brothers Big Sisters that gives kids extra support and fun activities. Would I get a big sister? Emma asked excitedly. Maybe. Would you like that? Emma nodded enthusiastically. It would be fun to have someone to talk about girl things with. Not that I don't love talking to you, she added quickly. Marcus laughed. I know, Em, and I think it would be good for you to have more people in your life who care about you. Over the next week, Marcus began the process of applying for various assistance programs. Mrs. Rodriguez helped him with the paperwork during lunch periods, and Mr. Peterson gave him time off for appointments. To Marcus's surprise, the social workers he met with were supportive and impressed by how well he had been managing on his own. The changes at school were equally surprising. Jake had been notably quiet since their confrontation, but more importantly, other students had begun treating Marcus differently. Lindsay started sitting with him at lunch, and soon other kids joined them. Marcus found himself part of a group for the first time since elementary school. "I can't believe you've been doing all this by yourself," said David, a classmate who had joined their lunch table. "My mom complains when she has to help me with one homework assignment." "It's not that big a deal," Marcus said, still uncomfortable with attention. "Are you kidding?" Lindsay laughed. "You're basically raising a kid while getting good grades and working a job. That's superhero stuff." For the first time in years, Marcus felt like maybe he wasn't so different from other teenagers after all. His circumstances were unique, but his desire to succeed and protect the people he loved was something everyone could understand. A month later, Marcus sat in the school counselor's office reviewing his progress. The family assistance programs had been approved, reducing their financial stress significantly. Emma had been matched with a big sister volunteer who took her to movies and helped with school projects. Marcus's grades were improving now that he could focus better in class. "How are you feeling about everything?" the counselor asked. "Scared," Marcus admitted. "Good, but scared. I spent so long thinking that needing help meant I was failing Emma. Now I'm wondering if I was actually failing her by trying to do everything alone." "What makes you think that?" "She was worried about me getting too tired to take care of her. She was protecting my feelings instead of telling me when she needed things. That's not how it should be. She should feel safe enough to just be a kid." The counselor nodded. "It sounds like you're learning that accepting help isn't giving up control. It's gaining support. That's a very mature realization." Quote, "That afternoon, Marcus picked up Emma from her big sister outing. She ran to him with paint-covered hands and a huge smile. "Look what we made," she said, holding up a ceramic mug with their handprints pressed into the clay. "Sarah helped me make it for you." Marcus examined the mug, which had "World's Best Brother" painted around the rim in Emma's careful handwriting. "It's perfect," he said, meaning it completely. As they walked home together, Emma chattering about her day, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. Their apartment was still small, and their budget was still tight. But they no longer felt alone. There were people in their corner now. People who understood that families came in all shapes and sizes. At dinner that night, Emma looked across their small table with a serious expression. "Marcus." "Yeah, Em? I'm proud of you." "Proud of me? What for?" "For being brave enough to tell people the truth. For letting people help us. For taking such good care of me all this time." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "I'm proud of you too, Em. For being patient with me while I figured things out. For being such a good kid even when things were hard." Emma grinned. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" "The best team," Marcus agreed. Later that evening, as Marcus finished his homework at the kitchen table, he thought about Jake and the other bullies who had made his life difficult for so long. He realized he no longer felt angry with them. Their cruelty had come from ignorance, not malice. They had never been hungry, or scared, or responsible for another person's welfare. In a strange way, he felt sorry for them. Marcus looked at Emma's latest drawing on the refrigerator. This one showed their family as it was now, with additional stick figures representing Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Peterson, Sarah the big sister, and their new friends. The drawing was crowded and colorful and full of life. At the bottom, in Emma's careful handwriting, were the words, "My big family." Marcus smiled as he turned off the lights and headed to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But for the first time in 2 years, he wouldn't be facing them alone. He had learned that strength didn't come from carrying everything by yourself. It came from building a community of people who cared about each other. As he drifted off to sleep, Marcus thought about the boy who had walked through school hallways with his head down, too proud and too scared to let anyone see who he really was. That boy had been brave in his own way, but this new version of himself, surrounded by support and friendship, felt infinitely stronger. Emma was safe, they were together, and they had a future full of possibilities. That was everything Marcus had ever wanted, and more than he had ever dared to hope for.